If you enjoy what you hear here today, please consider supporting me on my Patreon page. Every dollar helps, and you get to see content that you won't see here.
Chapter 43. The Wave. Canterlot, hours after Ponyville's fall. Canterlot Castle was in chaos. EUP and Royal Guards alike rushed in all directions down the various halls, their alert level at its possible highest. Word was just coming in as to the recent fates of both Fort Hurricane and Ponyville. And on top of that, there were also attacks on both Vancouver and Las Pegasus in progress. Medics were rushing to the training grounds, ready to receive the wounded from the transports just returning from the battles. Others making sure the changelings were secure in their rooms until they were sure Canterlot wasn't next on the immediate list of targets. All zeppelins above the city had their weapons primed and ready to fire on a moment's notice. All transports ready to be sent into the air at the first signs of red glowing eyes. As those transports in the training grounds landed, so too did passengers such as Vladimir, Shining Armor, and Princess Cadence disembark. As the wounded were taken away, the EUP soldiers without injuries were taken to debriefing and subsequent reassignment. The princess and the stallions with her were directed straight back to the war room, where the other alicorns were located. In said war room, Princesses Celestia and Luna were with Captain Broadsword, awaiting the arrival of their fellows. The other leaders were missing, far too busy to control the mess outside all throughout Equestria. They had been hit, and they had been hit hard. The projection atop the table had all of Equestria on display, the representations of Fort Hurricane and Ponyville glowing red, while Las Pegasus and Vancouver were amber in color, indicating the ongoing situation in those two locales. Latest reports indicate that there were no changeling queens among the forces attacking Las Pegasus and Vancouver, Broadsword reported, gesturing to the two cities in question. It was just a swarm of drones, not quite as dense as the ones reported at Fort Hurricane and Ponyville either.
What is their situation? Luna asked. Do they need reinforcements?
A Zeppelin, the brightest day, under the command of Captain Dawnrider, has been redirected to assist the defense of Las Pegasus. The EUP there has taken heavy casualties, but so have the changelings. Some of the casinos have been converted into either outposts for the EUP or civilian shelters.
Will they hold out?
The brightest day has a few transports with it, and a complement of EUP on board. They should be able to reinforce them enough to hold out.
And Vancouver?
The Princess of the Sun inquired.
Have any reinforcements been sent there?
Not at this time, Broadsword replied. They've also taken losses on both sides, but the EUP there seem to be doing a little better. The changelings have largely been unable to breach to the city center.
At least there is some good news, Luna noted. We cannot afford to lose any of our major cities. Not after Ponyville.
What happened to Ponyville? Shining Armor asked as he and the others all barged into the war room.
We got word that Twilight was there with a swarm, but that was the end of it.
Shining, Vlad, Princess Cadence, Broadsword greeted. You're back! There wasn't anywhere else to go, Vladimir remarked as he took a seat next to his solar counterpart. Fort Hurricane is dust. Cadence sighed as she and Shining Armor also took their seats.
We've been seeing far too much of this war room as of late. What's happening out there? We received a similar report to you. The commander of the EUP at Ponyville indicated that a swarm was attacking with Queen Twilight at its head,
Luna replied grimly.
That was the last we heard from them. But surely you saw the smoke in the distance as you approached Canterlot, yes?
We did, Vladimir confirmed. You've really heard nothing?
No. Ponyville has been destroyed.
What about the civilians? Shining Armor asked. Spike, Twilight's friends.
Shining Armor, we simply do not know,
Luna responded regretfully.
We can only hope at this point that they emerge somewhere. But we want to know what happened at Fort Hurricane,
Celestia abruptly addressed the three.
How did a secure installation such as that fall so easily?
Sabotage, Shining explained. We were able to get a little bit from the Colonel before he lost consciousness.
They sent out a search party for survivors of the Gleaming Shield,
Cadence stated, lighting her horn and creating representations on the map.
When the search party returned, they had all been subjected to suggestions, much like Shining Armor when Chrysalis retrieved Twilight 10 years ago.
Right. Suggestions, Shining continued. After they were finished debriefing, one of them destroyed the shield crystal, rendering the fort completely unable to call for reinforcements. The place was in chaos. 2 changeling queens, Queen Cocoon and Vulgaris, were also among the swarm. And so were their daughters. We rescued who we could, but Fort Hurricane itself was beyond saving by that point, Vladimir concluded before glancing over the map. So, what's up with the Lost Pegasus and Van Hoover? They're holding off their own attacks, but they should be fine, Broadsword stated. If that's all they're doing for now, then we shouldn't take any more significant losses for the time being. Princess Celestia! A guard exclaimed as he burst into the war room.
This is a private meeting,
Celestia scolded as she turned to face the intruder.
I do hope you have a good reason for the intrusion.
I do. A very good reason. The guard responded with obvious panic in his voice. We just received reports that the swarm from both Ponyville and Fort Hurricane has been sighted, along with a great many more changeling queens.
More changeling queens?
Luna said questioningly.
How many more?
All of them. The swarms have linked up and are now moving on together. Broadsword arose from his seat and approached the pony. Guard, take a deep breath and calm down. The guard did as he was told, composing himself and then nodding in confirmation. Good. Now where exactly is this swarm heading?
Manehattan.
Manehattan. Rarity had remained to Saronis and Polula since they had been severed from the Hive mind sometime before, never leaving their sides for anything more than a moment. Their time in the hotel room had long since passed them by, but luckily a friend of Rarity had been happy to let the trio stay in her home until they were able to move on. A small bright side of their situation was that Rarity was able to directly oversee the working of the Carousel Boutique's Manehattan branch, and even continue the changeling-centric fashion design they had come to Manehattan for in the first place, though it was, by that point, more to take Saronis and Polula's minds off of their dire predicament. It was partially a successful endeavor, but nothing could fully take away the emptiness within their own minds.
We really must thank you again, Coco,
Rarity thanked for the millionth and second time, sipping her tea.
You didn't have to do any of this for us. Nonsense,
Coco Pommel dismissed.
You would have done the same for me. It's the least I could do for you three. We do appreciate it,
Saronis concurred.
Things are difficult at the moment. I can't even imagine it,
Coco stated.
What you're going through. You can stay for as long as you need. I just hope we can go home soon,
Polula commented.
Not that I'm not grateful, but, well...
Saronis gave her sister a side hug, the two ponies looking at the younger changeling in understanding.
Well, at least business down at Rarity for you is still booming,
Coco said, changing the subject.
And I think those changeling-based dresses are incredible. Yes, we've worked very hard on them,
Rarity responded.
I may get to introduce them once this nasty business is concluded. I even have a few changeling-inspired dresses for ponies among the line, given the positive responses to the dresses I designed for Twilight over the past few Grand Galloping Galas.
Coco chuckled.
And critics thought making such fabulous dresses for changelings was a pipe dream.
Rarity rolled her eyes with a...
Such narrow-mindedness. It was a challenge to my skills as a fashionista. Well, I sent a shipment of the dresses off to our boutique in Carolot this morning. Sassy Santa should be able to hold on to them before they go on sale,
Coco stated.
I also tried to have some of them sent to Ponyville a little while ago, but they were outright refused without so much as an explanation. So the shipment didn't get sent to the Carousel Boutique?
Rarity asked.
I wonder what the holdup is. We can keep them here until the problem is solved, whatever that problem is. There are plenty to keep then,
Saronis commented.
I didn't even know you could make that many dresses in just a few weeks. Rarity achieves the impossible when she's determined.
Coco stated with a giggle.
Hardly,
Rarity dismissed.
I had help from you, for one. What would I do without you?
Coco Pommel blushed.
Well, I mean, you did most of it. Don't sell yourself so short, darling,
Rarity remarked.
You do wonderful work here.
Coco was about to respond, only to be cut off by the sound of a siren filling the air. Shadows creeped in through the window, and all the occupants of the room glanced between each other.
What's going on?
Palula asked worriedly. She was answered by the flaming hulk of a helicopter falling straight past their window and being crushed against the streets below. All four mares yelped in surprise and jumped from their seats, quickly backpedaling as an explosion caused the window to completely shatter and shower the room with shards of glass. They became frozen in place for a minute or two, the sounds of fighting becoming increasingly evident outside. Regaining some of her composure, Rarity rushed forwards and looked out of what remained of the window, examining the streets below. Civilians were being corralled elsewhere by the EUP, as others attempted to douse the flames from the burning metallic hulk that had crashed down there. When Rarity looked up, her eyes widened as far as they could go. The unmistakable sight of a changeling swarm in combat with the Zeppelins was above the city. The airborne fleet had quickly rallied into formations and unleashed several volleys into the swarm, killing countless changelings among it. 2 blue streaks of magic shot forth from one of them, cutting through them like a knife on butter. Likewise, the fleet of metal seafaring ships in the bay had also rallied, and were beginning their own flak guns up into position. The naval fleet, too, began firing up into the swarm.
Dear Celestia!
Rarity exclaimed.
It's a war out there!
They couldn't help but yelp again as some pony kicked down the door, a squad of EUP becoming visible in the hallway. "You four, come on!" one of the soldiers shouted. "We're moving all civilians out of here. We have a transport on the roof for the ponies, but you 2 changelings need to follow us to a different one."
What?
Rarity questioned loudly.
Why?
"I'm just following orders, ma'am," the soldier responded. "The swarm will be after any free changelings within the city. Having them on the same bird may attract undue attention, so they go in a separate one." Rarity shook her head.
Listen to me, you ruffian. These 2 are under my protection as the element of generosity.
"I beg your pardon?" Another EUP soldier suddenly whispered something into the first's ear, likely a confirmation of Rarity's identity, if the fashionista had to guess. The soldier groaned. "All right, you can accompany them if you want, but your other friend goes to the roof."
I'll be all right, Rarity.
Coco assured.
Just get Saronis and Palula out of here.
Rarity hugged her friend.
I will. Be safe.
One of the soldiers led Coco Pommel away and joined the stream of ponies heading for the roof. The remaining 3 were led out of Coco's apartment by the rest of the EUP squad. "We have a landing zone set up about a block from here," one of the EUP ponies explained. "All remaining changelings within the city are being taken there. We don't have much time before those attacking drones begin a ground war."
You're not going to hurt them, are you?
Saronis asked as they were led downstairs. "We have orders to incapacitate where we can," the soldier explained. "But it's unlikely. We have reason to believe that captured changelings die anyway."
What?
The building shuddered from some kind of impact as the group reached the ground floor, being ushered out of the building and into open daylight. The battle in the sky was still going on, all the Zeppelins still intact, but one had flames billowing from it as the ship continued to take a pounding. As Rarity was moved down the street, she passed by the wreckage, suppressing her need to throw up at the smell of burning flesh. Blades chopping through the air caused her to look up, and she saw the multiple helicopters on the roof take off into the air with the occupants of the apartment building on board. A few changelings made to intercept them, but were shot out of the sky before they could do any real damage.
At least Coco made it.
Saronis commented from Rarity's left. Rarity was glad her friend was safe, but was left with the most pressing matter of her own survival, and that of her 2 charges. The EUP led them further onwards, soon moving into the next city block, along where the landing zone had been set up. The element of generosity allowed herself to sigh in relief as their ride out of the city came into view. Several changelings were being loaded up into it, and each and every single one of them had an air of fear about them. None of them had an interest in being stripped of their free will by the swarm. "There it is!" one of the soldiers barked out. "Get on board immediately!"
We will!
Rarity shouted back. The helicopter mere steps away by that point. Of course, that simply wasn't meant to be. Rarity lost all concept of space and time for a moment, the world spinning as something had sent her flying through the air. She landed with a painful crack, her eyes glancing about in a daze. As she managed to examine the scene around her from the position in which she lay, she saw only destruction. A large changeling queen, with a teal mane with green highlights striking through it, was disposing of the EUP as if they were mere nuisances. One by one, they were torn to pieces, leaving none but the terrified Saronis and Palula alive. The helicopter's blades were spinning, systems and enchantments all coming alive. Seeing this, Twilight Sparkle lit her horn up and took hold of the rotor, ripping it straight off of the craft, where she then discarded it casually. As Twilight approached the craft, Saronis and Palula scampered over to Rarity and helped her back to her hooves.
Rarity, are you alright?
Saronis asked urgently.
That blast hit you hard. I think so.
Rarity stuttered as she rested against Sarona.
Is that Twilight? I think that is the Queen.
Saronis confirmed, a tremble in her voice. Twilight had torn the pilots out of the cockpits and disposed of them just as she had the EUP. She now had the changeling trapped in the transport and wasted no time in assimilating them into the Hive mind.
Sis, we have to run!
Palula shouted, tugging at the other 2. Rarity nodded.
She's right, darling. We need to go. Now. I know. Let's...
A scream caused both Rarity and Saronis' blood to run cold. Palula was yanked backwards with a lavender hue gripping her tightly on her tail. All the drones within the transport now had glowing red eyes, each of them flying upwards to join the battle. With them gone, Twilight's attention was focused solely on the 2 changelings and the single unicorn.
Do not run from me,
Twilight growled, levitating Palula up and bringing her to eye level.
Join your people. Pew!
Saronis screamed frantically, firing a bolt of magic at the changeling queen. Twilight intercepted the bolt with a small shield directly in its path. Other than that, she didn't even look at Saronis, her horn meeting Palula's, as the teenage changeling's eyes shifted from blue to red.
Palula!
Saronis whimpered as her little sister was released, the young changeling flying off to join the rest of the swarm. Twilight finally turned to the remaining 2 that stood in opposition to her, advancing on them like a cat would a mouse.
Saronis, don't you want to join your sister?
Twilight asked mockingly.
Come quietly and leave the element of generosity to her fate. Twilight,
Rarity pleaded.
We're friends. We've known each other for years. For Celestia's sake, you bear the element of magic. Not anymore.
Rarity flinched, lighting her horn up for what little combat magic she knew in a futile defensive effort. Twilight stopped a moment, and then gave a spine-chilling chuckle.
You fight me? How amusing.
Rarity trembled in place. Not just because she was being confronted by a changeling queen, but because said changeling queen was her friend. The light on her horn fizzled out. She simply didn't have the heart to fire upon her. And then Sirona stood between Rarity and Twilight.
Oh? What's this?
Twilight asked curiously.
I mean, really? You won't hurt my friend!
Sirona shouted in determination, her horn glowing bright green. Twilight looked unimpressed. Instead of responding, she simply lit up her own horn and grabbed onto Sirona's with her magic, beginning to drag Sirona's towards her as she had Polula previously.
Rarity! Run!
Sirona shouted, her horn glowing brighter as a green vortex formed around the unicorn. The last thing Rarity saw as she slipped into the portal was Sirona's horn touched Twilight's, her eyes shifting as all fear left her, and a complete loyalty and servitude to the Empress overtook her mind. Twilight discarded Sironis, the changeling moving to join her sister and the rest of the Empress's faithful. She briefly stared at where Rarity had vanished. Deep within her subconscious, a voice attempted to reach out and contact the sisters she had just claimed.
Thank you, Sironis, for saving my friend. We'll be free soon, I promise you!
Twilight in the waking world took no notice of her inner voice, instead listening in to what the Empress of the Changelings had to say.
It is time, my pet. Destroy the city. Yes, Empress.
Twilight opened her wings and took to the air, quickly coming up in formation alongside all the other changeling queens. They were all there, and they all had an express purpose. En route to the bay, they passed directly through a zeppelin, blowing a hole straight through the ship and causing its ultimate destruction. Others attempted to move to intercept the changeling queens, but the drones would keep them busy, even using their own bodies as meat shields when necessary. Any shots that did get through were simply deflected via shield. Soon, 17 changeling queens and 2 princesses came to hover above the bay in a circular formation, all facing inwards. They all lit their horns, 18 green and 1 lavender, their magic coalescing at the very center of the circle. The gathering energy was a maelstrom of pure mana, untampered and filled with rage. It gathered, and then gathered more, keeping up until it was an unstable schism ready to burst and consume them all. And then they released all that magic directly downwards. A beam of blinding light bypassed all the ships in the bays and passed through the water surface without issue. The strike didn't take long to hit the surface beneath the waves, and a gigantic shockwave shot outwards in every direction. The water around the impact was sent barreling in every direction. The waves struck against the ships, capsizing those in the immediate vicinity. And then the ground began to shake. The entire port shook itself apart and sunk beneath the waves. Within the city, foundations screeched as they snapped and buckled, and the waves only got higher. Ponies on the ground and in the air could only watch in pure terror at the final product. A tsunami forming right in the bay, with a hunger that would only be sated by the city itself. All the ships that survived the initial shock wave were torn apart by the tsunami, the coastline vanishing without a trace as pure death impacted the first of Manehattan's trademark skyscrapers. Nothing survived the contact. Not with the changelings continuing to rain fire down upon the city. 2 forces of nature wreaking havoc wherever they landed. The Empress watched through her thralls with immense satisfaction as the wave progressed deeper and deeper into the city, killing all who were caught in its path. Soon, what was left was submerged in water, which began to slowly recline and drag much out to sea. The fleet in the air began to move off, leaving the swarm behind during the event and getting those they could save out of the city limits. Among those fleeing was a transport containing the shell-shocked element of generosity. Saronis' portal had luckily deposited her right in the path of a squad. They had brought her aboard their own ride, just before the city was lost to the wave. And then, in a land far from Equestria, the Empress couldn't help but laugh. Lost Pegasus and Van Hoover may have survived, but Manehattan was a sodden wreck, with so many lives lost. Now, she just had to see the princess's response.